Dana came out. He was talking about Ferguson and Gaethje, and he said this will be the most violent fight you've ever seen. That much I can guarantee you. That's an interesting word. That's a very interesting word to use, violent. And it made me start thinking, what is the most violent fight I've ever seen? And this is just a personal opinion, right? I would love to hear what your guys' opinion are too. Eddie Alvarez was going to fight Justin Gaethje, and Eddie came out and said, this is for the title, most violent man in the UFC. It was like 9 or 10 days before the fight when I found out that Eddie had made that up. I thought that Eddie had done such a good job with identifying this fight as being for the most violent man title. That is the fight that I believe is the most violent fight. Perhaps it was just a really awesome fight and a very violent fight, but not the most violent fight. Perhaps that is the case. I can remember one night, Randy Couture fought Pedro Hizo. And see, violent's an interesting word. How are we defining violent? How do we define damage? How do we do those things? Randy Couture fought Pedro Hizo, and Pedro was using leg kicks. Pedro was trained by Marco Huas, and they were using these leg kicks. All the boxing was just to test range. Boom, and he'd come in with these leg kicks. And Randy's leg was so discolored, and he even had to change stances and fight in a southpaw stance just to hide that leg, but Randy wouldn't quit. He wouldn't fall down or go away. But leg kicks are one of those things. It's very hard. It's just not as obvious. It's not as obvious as a swollen eye or a bloody nose or a knockout punch. It's a slower burn. I remember the night I was there live, Jose Aldo versus Uriah Faber, and it was the same thing. Aldo just kept landing these leg kicks, and Faber wouldn't back down. He couldn't quite get to his wrestling. Now all of a sudden his legs are slow because he's got this dead leg. I mean, the ultimate Charlie horse over the course of 5 rounds, and Faber couldn't get to his take, and Jose's chopping him down. I see Faber in the back, big smile on his face, saying hello. You know, I don't know what to say to him, and the reason it's an awkward spot for me is he's on a gurney. They're just taking him out the back. The ambulance door is there. It's open. He's about to get in and have to go to the hospital, but it was because of those leg kicks. I have to think that qualifies as violent. I mean, I would have to think where a guy is beaten so bad in the legs that he has to go seek medical attention. That has to qualify as violent. I want your guys' opinion on this. I'm going to stick with my initial pick. I'm sticking with Justin Gaethje versus Eddie Alvarez. Most violent fight of all time. Most violent man in MMA, Eddie Alvarez. So you guys tell me, what's the most violent fight you've ever seen?
Hey, can I ask you something about Henry Cejudo? Because this clip resurfaced yesterday when Dominic was on my show last September. He was in Abu Dhabi. He dropped an incredible promo. He cut this amazing promo on Cejudo saying that they used to train together in Arizona, and like Cejudo's almost this test tube Olympic baby where he was coddled his whole life. He doesn't really know, and being champion, being a gold medalist, this all defines him. You know, he needs this sort of thing to feel important. Honestly, is that the Henry Cejudo that you know? Because you were on the same team as him, 2008, right?
I think where the whole cringe thing, right? People almost take him like not serious. That would be the biggest mistake you could ever make in your life. This is a kid that left Arizona as a 16-year-old kid to live in the Olympic Training Center and go through our training camps, Ariel. He would wrestle with the adults, with the senior team, and then go wrestle for his high school in the matches. That dude's real, man. Wow. And if Dominic believes that this kid's been coddled or anything like that, that's a problem, because this dude has always been one of the hardest working people I've ever met. Imagine being a 15-year-old kid and you're uprooted from Arizona and put into the Olympic program, right? Your high school isn't the same. Your high school experience isn't the same. So all the things that Dominic did, Henry didn't have to do that because he was this kid that was almost a protege that was getting groomed to be an Olympian. So of course that's going to come with some differences. He was a protege. He was groomed to be this champion, and he's proven to be that champion at every step of the way, right? Olympic champ, UFC champion. He was that guy that was almost like, that was almost his destiny. When he got out of high school, he went to the Olympic Training Center, not just some small room to practice wrestling like the rest of us did. So yeah, he's different. He's much different, but he isn't. It doesn't make him any less real. He's as dangerous as they come. If there was a test of whether or not you could train a young man to become Olympic champ and then a UFC champion, it's Henry Cejudo, and it worked, right?
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching the video. I want to start the show today by talking about this fight between Cejudo and Cruz. Henry Cejudo, UFC bantamweight champion, defending his title against Dominic Cruz at UFC 249. When people are breaking down this fight, they're doing it without really breaking down the fight. What I mean to say is they're like, well, Cruz came, and I've done this too. Cruz came back against Mizugaki and won. Came back against Dillashaw, close, but won. Sure, he hasn't fought in 3.5 years, and he lost to Cody, and he's not even ranked. But, you can't really count him out. That's not really breaking down the fight. That's more explaining the other part of the story, which is, one, he's got a little bit more of that star power appeal. Two, dude, it's a hell of an interesting story. Dominic Cruz is 35 years old. He's lost huge amounts of his time in his career to injury, to layoff, to setback of a variety of sorts. And in the two most previous situations where he had to come back, he did so successfully. It creates for a very interesting narrative to sell. If he ends up winning, I mean, it's one of the most miraculous stories. Interesting story, but what does he really have as in terms of making that happen? Probably not great. But I was thinking about Cruz, and you know how he sets these angle changes, and he has these wide looping punches, and he has these sort of fits and starts with his feet, and then he backs up and then he changes angle again. What would that do to someone like Cejudo? In some ways, I think Henry is going to be a terrible matchup for him. And in some ways, Henry is totally unproven as it relates to this weight class. Cejudo's got all the speed, he's got reflexes, and he's got that wrestling pedigree and sort of proven ability where even if you can get him down to the floor, he's not going to spend a ton of time there. He's got good linear boxing. He's got the ability to, he's got good defense, not so much with the leg kicks, but also who's going to pursue and who's going to lead. So I think the leg kicks will be a key part because we've seen Demetrius Johnson rematch, obviously the Moraes fight. A lot of times, Cejudo checking leg kicks has not been a big part of his repertoire, and I think using that to score and then exit is going to be a big key point. Cejudo is kind of the guy that likes to take the fight to his rivals. If that's the case, I think Cruz is going to be harder to beat. I think he's very good at absorbing pressure and getting out of the way, scoring and moving, constantly being in motion, not being a stationary target, hard to hit, not moving in straight lines, not coming at you even when he is backing up and taking a moment to stop and then intercept. He's very good at that kind of a thing. That's going to make, in that particular case, Cruz, assuming his game has not dropped off a cliff, an interesting matchup for Cejudo. And who leads and who follows in that dance is critical to success. The conditions under which Cruz tends to thrive are important with an opponent either both pursuing and backing up. A lot of people are allowing the narrative stories and the potential sports angle here to dictate Cruz's chances. I think that might be a bit of a mistake, or at least a very imprecise way to think about the fight. And as you dig into the details, the fight gets pretty damn interesting. That's not to say that the title shot is meritorious. It's just to say I'm not telling you it's a terrible fight, because it's not.
What's up, crew? You like me? You crush that quarantine. Monster Energy.